Great beef pho is a super flavorful dish that packs a ton of beefy flavor and spices. You'll want to watch these crucial insights to maximize flavor in your home kitchen. Traditional beef pho is a Vietnamese dish that's all about building a super rich beef broth. Usually this dish takes a long time to build the flavor and simmer. We'll go over a couple tips that'll save on time without sacrificing all that flavor. Let's dive in. The first step to developing flavor for this pho is to roast some aromatics. Here we are using a yellow onion and a big hunk of ginger. To really develop the flavor, cut them in half and roast them under the broiler. The flavor that comes from roasting ginger is just fantastic. Now is a good time to get some browning on the beef shanks. Since we're using a broiler, we'll roast the shanks under the heat as well to develop a little color, which will result in a lot more flavor. Broil on high for 10 minutes, flip the shanks, then another 10 minutes. See the nice browning that's developed on everything? That packs so much flavor, but don't worry about the black on the onion. That little bit of char will pack some great complex onion flavor. Now get into the pot with everything and top it off with a little water and some low sodium beef broth. Make sure to use low sodium broth so that you can control the seasoning as it reduces. Finally, we'll add our whole star anise, cinnamon, coriander, soy sauce, some fish sauce, and some turbinado sugar. This combination of sweet and savory is really what gives the backbone to this broth. After the broth begins to simmer, you'll notice a foam forming on top. It's good to skim this off while trying not to remove any of the floating spices. While the broth simmers, you can prepare all of the garnishes for the soup. Garnishes like limes, mint, chilies, cilantro give such a fragrant boost to the dish along with a little bit of heat. Just pick the mint leaves from the stems and give them a rough chop. Slice the jalapeños thin and on an angle, of course. I simply like to pick the cilantro from the stem. There's no need to chop it. That will just bruise such a delicate herb. The addition of some bean sprouts will add a wonderful crunch to a soup with such varying textures. These are some of my favorite traditional garnishes that are readily available at the grocery store. So a little something extra here. I've got some flat iron steak that I'm gonna sear off to put on this pho. You've got that great shreddy beef shank. It's nice to have a little bit of texture from this flat iron. Since we have so many flavors going on in this dish, I'm just seasoning the steak with a little bit of salt and pepper. Flat iron is extremely tender, which makes it a great addition to a soup. You don't wanna mess around with trying to cut pieces of a steak that are floating in a broth. Use a neutral oil like canola to get a good sear on the flat iron. It's a fairly thin steak, so you will only need to sear it over a relatively high heat for a few minutes per side, and then give it a good rest. While the steak rests, get the rice noodles soaking in some hot water. Now that all of our elements for the pho are prepped, it's time to focus back on the broth. I like to pull any large chunks of aromatics out with tongs to make it easier to find those tender pieces of beef shank swimming around at the bottom of that broth. You can see that the shank has started to fall apart, which means that it's perfectly tender and delicious. Shank is a perfect cut to add flavor and texture to the broth while providing some tender, shredded braised beef. Look out for any whole spices that might have come along for the ride. Give the shank meat a rough shred so that it's easier to eat when using a spoon. Finally, strain the broth of any remaining spices and aromatics. Slicing the flat iron very thin will make it easier to eat with the broth. And having this second texture of beef will just complement that tender and decadent shredded beef shank. Once that's all sliced, we'll put it all together. Get the rice noodles into a bowl, then ladle the broth over them. The smell of this broth just permeates the air. It's just so flavorful. I love everything going on in this broth. Time to start topping with the garnishes. If you're serving a few people, I would just leave these on the table for people to add as they like. It makes it a lot more fun just to build your own bowl. I like to add a little bit of everything on top, with plenty of that shredded beef shank and a ton of that flat iron. Top it off with some of those fresh herbs and give it a good squeeze of lime. And apparently I forgot to break out the hot sauce. Don't forget the hot sauce. So flavorful. It's got all that spice, the richness of the beef. That broth is just luscious. And it all happened in such a shorter amount of time than it usually takes to make pho by using a little bit of beef broth and then fortifying it with the beef shanks and then all that onion and ginger. It really comes through in the end, and it's such a deep, flavorful broth. So delicious and so easy. Remember to like and subscribe, and join me next time here in the test kitchen of Certified Angus Beef.